In the 1970s, Chicago was more than steel and skyline. It was a city where 20,000 people earned a living inside a single mill. Irish parishes anchored entire neighborhoods, and political loyalty meant access to power. But beneath the grind of shift whistles and the pride of immigrant blocks, tensions were quietly building. They were divided by concrete, reshaped by weather, forever defined by work. If you think you know what this city looked like then, you have not seen what made it truly matter. So what did daily life actually feel like inside this industrial giant? Shift whistles cut through the morning dark on Chicago's southeast side, calling thousands of men and women to the gates of U.S. Steel South Works and Republic Steel. Along the Calumet River, ore carriers nudged into slips, their hulls packed with iron ore and limestone from the upper lakes. Overhead, cranes the size of houses rolled out along ore bridges, feeding mountains of raw material into waiting furnaces. The air hummed with the sound of rail hoppers coupling, trucks reversing, and boots crunching on gravel as workers filed through turnstiles, lunch pails in hand. Inside, the mill floor stretched for blocks, 600 acres of machinery, conveyor belts, and molten steel. Blast furnaces glowed orange, their heat pushing against winter cold. Men in hard hats checked gauges, shoveled coke, and watched as red-hot slabs slid down rollers, sparks flying. Every movement was timed to the minute. Ore bridges had to unload on schedule, feeding the furnaces in a steady rhythm. A single delay could halt an entire line. Above it all, the mill's clock tower kept watch, marking the start of each shift and the end of another long night. A steelworker remembered that when the whistle blew, you knew you were part of something big. Outside, the neighborhoods woke to the same rhythm, kids heading to school, corner stores opening, the sky already streaked with smoke from the stacks. The work was hard, the hours long, but a steady job in the mills meant security and pride. By sunrise, the city's industrial heart was already beating strong, every shift a small part of the power that built Chicago's skyline. Union cards rode in back pockets, and the United Steelworkers' eagle crest was stitched onto jackets and lunch pails. Inside the mills, the Union Hall was as much a fixture as the blast furnace. Every shift, bulletin boards displayed the latest contract updates, grievance forms, and notices for softball leagues and fish fries. In the break rooms, battered union newsletters passed from hand to hand, pages filled with wage tables, pension news, and cartoons poking fun at management. In 1974, the union negotiated a base wage of $5.85 an hour at Southworks, with cost of living raises tied to the Consumer Price Index. For many, that meant a house, a car, and a path to college for their kids, security that felt earned, not given. The union was more than paychecks. It was the right to speak up if a foreman pushed too hard, or if safety gear was missing. Grievance meetings could run late into the evening, with stewards arguing over overtime slips and seniority lists. The sense of solidarity ran deep. We looked out for each other, recalled one retired steelworker who started at Republic in 1969. If a guy got hurt, the union made sure his family was taken care of. If a guy got laid off, there was always someone to help find him work. On payday Fridays, the bars along Commercial Avenue filled with men in work boots, trading stories about the latest negotiation or the rumor of layoffs. The union picnic every summer brought families out to Calumet Park with raffle tickets, tug-of-war, and speeches from local organizers. Even as the mills began to slow in the late 1970s, the union's voice echoed across the neighborhoods, reminding everyone that dignity was something to be stood up for together. These rituals, big and small, shaped the social fabric outside the plant gates. The union wasn't just an institution, it was a way of life, woven into the city's working-class pride. On the streets of Bridgeport, the day started with the bells of St. Bridget's, calling families to early mass. Inside the parish, pews filled with Irish faces, parents, grandparents, children in pressed uniforms for the parish school. Baptisms, weddings, and wakes all passed through those doors, each event tying another thread in the neighborhood's fabric. Priests handed out bulletins with news of the next block party or church supper, and sometimes a quiet word about which family needed help paying the heating bill. Out on 31st Street, the corner taverns came alive after shifts let out. At Maria's, regulars crowded the bar, cash registers ringing as beer flowed, and the White Sox game played on the television. Old-timers swapped stories in thick brogues, the air full of laughter and the scent of sausage rolls from the bakery next door. On summer nights, parish festivals spilled into the streets. Kegs on ice, polka bands on makeshift stages, children darting between tables piled with pierogi and rye bread. A few miles away on the southwest side, Polish families kept their own rhythms. Mornings began at St. Bruno's, where the bulletin boards listed times for confession and the next pierogi-making session. Bakers opened before dawn, filling glass cases with poppy seed rolls and kolatsky. The smell of fresh bread drifted down Archer Avenue, mixing with the sharp tang of horseradish from corner delis. Inside the neighborhood taverns, men gathered for a quick shot of vodka before heading home, Polish flags draped behind the bar and soccer matches playing on the radio. Block parties stretched across whole streets with grills smoking, accordion music floating through the air, and neighbors greeting each other in a mix of English and Polish. In these enclaves, parish halls, taverns, and bakeries set the pace of life. Every block was its own world, with rituals and anchors that shaped belonging. The city's strength was measured not just in steel, but in the steady pulse of these close-knit neighborhoods. On 18th Street in Pilsen, the morning air carried the smell of fresh tortillas and sweet bread from corner bakeries. By the mid-1970s, Czech shop signs faded as new taquerias, mercados, and Spanish-language storefronts took their place. Families who had arrived from Jalisco or Michoacan in the late 1960s now filled the blocks, their children playing soccer in alleys and walking to bilingual Mass at St. Procopius. The neighborhood pulsed with new rhythms, mariachi from open windows, the call of street vendors, and the clang of the L overhead. In July 1976, Fiesta del Sol brought thousands to the streets for the first time, banners in Spanish and English, papel picado strung between lampposts, and a crowd gathered for music, food, and speeches about neighborhood pride. La Raza newspaper snapped photos of the celebration, capturing faces painted with sunbursts and children waving Mexican flags. That day, the festival stage became a platform for church leaders and activists to talk about better schools and safer streets, and also for families to claim the block as their own. A Pilsen elder remembers that when they started Fiesta del Sol, it was more than a party. It was to show the city we belonged here. The church helped, the bakery gave bread, and everyone brought what they could. South of the Loop, the African-American communities along King Drive and Cottage Grove shaped their own sense of place. Every August, the Bud Billiken Parade wound through Bronzeville, drawing crowds that lined the avenue for miles. School bands marched, drill teams spun batons, and grandmothers waved from folding chairs along the curb. Churches organized social clubs and block parties, hosting gospel concerts and fish fries in basement halls. These gatherings offered both celebration and support, a network that stretched from the parade route to the steps of Ebenezer Baptist and beyond. In both Pilsen and the South Side, the 1970s brought new faces and new energy, but the anchors of church, family, and street life held neighborhoods together, even as the city around them kept changing. Every city service in 1970s Chicago ran through a web of loyalty, mapped out by the daily machine. The city was divided into 50 wards, each with a ward office, usually tucked above a storefront or in the back of a tavern, where the real business of running Chicago took place. Inside, a small staff kept track of who needed a sidewalk fixed, which alley needed plowing, and whose cousin was looking for a job at Streets and Sanitation. But the real power sat with the precinct captains. These men, almost always men, walked their blocks daily, keeping mental lists of who voted, who needed help, and who owed a favor. If a family's garbage was not picked up, the captain could make a call and have it done by the end of the day. If a neighbor's son needed summer work, the captain could get his name onto the city payroll. Nothing was automatic. Everything was personal. Mike Royko, writing in his columns, called it a city where politics was a service industry. The payroll lists were thick with names handed down by captains, each job a reward for loyalty at the polls. In Bridgeport, Daly's own neighborhood, the patronage system was an open secret. One former ward staffer remembered that if you wanted a city job, you talked to your captain. He would check if you voted in the last election, then maybe put in a word. You did not just get the job, you owed him. Precinct captains did not just deliver votes, they delivered services. Old women got their snow shoveled, new immigrants got help with city paperwork, and block parties got permits with a signature and a handshake. The system was disciplined, efficient, and deeply personal. If you wanted something done in your neighborhood, you did not call City Hall, you called your captain. In return, every election day you showed up at the polls and remembered who made things happen. Concrete carved new borders into Chicago's map. The Dan Ryan Expressway opened in the mid-1960s and cut a 12-lane trench through the south side, 300 feet wide, with deep concrete walls and medians as broad as small parks. Its roar never stopped. Trucks, cars, buses, day and night, moving people and goods between the loop and the far suburbs. The expressway did more than move traffic. It severed neighborhoods that had once flowed into each other, drawing a hard line between black and white Chicago. Construction of the Dan Ryan wiped out nearly 5,000 homes and hundreds of small businesses, corner stores, taverns, churches, factories along its path. Official records counted more than 25,000 residents forced to move. Many relocated to new public housing towers like Stateway Gardens and Robert Taylor Homes. Those high-rises, built along the expressway's edge, stacked thousands of families into narrow corridors of concrete and brick. For some, they offered a step up from slum apartments. For others, they became symbols of isolation, surrounded by traffic cut off from old connections. Census numbers tell the story of what followed. In the decade after the Dan Ryan opened, Southside census tracts along its corridor lost nearly a quarter of their population. White residents left in waves, moving west and south to suburbs like Oak Lawn and Blue Island. Suburban Cook County swelled by more than 250,000 people between 1960 and 1970, most of them white families leaving city blocks behind. On the east side of the expressway, black neighborhoods grew denser, hemmed in by policy and concrete. Mortgage redlining and city planning decisions made these divisions hard to cross. The expressway, the towers, the shifting addresses were more than just changes on a map. They were lines drawn in stone and steel, shaping who lived where, who left, and who stayed. The city's social map was being rewritten not by accident, but by design and concrete poured straight through the heart of old Chicago. Wrigley Field's ivy walls stood as a kind of promise, drawing crowds year after year, no matter what the standings said. On the north side, generations of Cubs fans filled the bleachers, radios tuned to Jack Brickhouse, scorecards in hand. Across town, Comiskey Park's brick arches rose above 35th Street, anchoring the White Sox faithful in Bridgeport and beyond. Even when the winds were scarce, the ritual never faded. Fathers and daughters, old-timers and new arrivals, all gathering in the shadow of the grandstands. Soldier Field packed in Bears fans on cold Sundays, the air thick with hope and the smell of cigars. At Chicago Stadium, Blackhawks jerseys and Bulls pennants waved over the din of organ music and stomping feet. The city's teams rarely brought home trophies in the 1970s, but attendance barely dipped. Loyalty wasn't about victory, it was about belonging. For many, the real score was measured in memories, the walk to the ballpark, the roar after a home run, the neighbor you always saw in the same seat. One longtime fan put it simply, "You stuck with your team, win or lose." That's just how it was in Chicago. On Maxwell Street, the market started before dawn. Vendors hauled carts and set up makeshift stalls along the curb. The air filled with the sizzle of onions, the snap of sausages, and the sharp scent of dill from pickle barrels. Polish Mexican and Jewish merchants called out in their own languages, selling everything from tube socks to tamales. By the early 1970s, this stretch was under pressure. Eviction notices pinned to plywood, rumors of university expansion spreading stall to stall. Still, the market pulsed with life. A family of vendors remembers that they sold sandwiches and fruit, rain or shine. Their father used to say, if you can work Maxwell, you can work anywhere. Deep dish pizza baked in brick ovens on Taylor Street, Italian beef dripped onto butcher paper in Little Italy, and hot dogs, no ketchup, were handed through steamy windows on every corner. Food was survival, but it was also pride. Each recipe carried a story, each bite a reminder of a city built by hands from every corner of the world. Wind off Lake Michigan shaped the city's temperament long before the first snow fell. In winter, the cold seemed to cut straight through brick and bone, gusts racing down alleys, rattling L platforms, freezing the river's edge. Commuters hunched in thick coats, breath clouding the air as they waited for trains that sometimes never came. Then in January 1979, the city faced a storm that tested even Chicago's endurance. Over 36 hours, more than 20 inches of snow-buried streets, cars vanished beneath drifts, and winds topped 60 miles an hour. The CTA shut down for 5 days, the longest halt in its history, leaving hundreds of thousands stranded. Plows fell behind, and for a week, neighbors dug each other out block by block. 13 lives were lost to the cold and chaos, but the city kept moving, on foot, on sleds, any way possible. One commuter remembers, you just bundled up, took your time, and hoped the L would show. You didn't complain, you just did it. That's Chicago. Chicago's steel mills are silent now, but their legacy shapes the city's bones and boundaries. As neighborhoods shift and towers rise, the grit and division of the 1970s still echo in every ward and on every corner. Today's Chicago is built on those pressures and on those loyalties. The city's strength and its challenges remain as real as the lake wind. Share your own Chicago memories below.